I am so glad to be here today, especially because dealing with stakeholders has been something that I've been going through for many, many years, both positive experiences and even negative ones. So, what I hope to share with you today is how to get ahead of that and how to not have negative experiences as much as possible. So, here's what I'm going to be covering. I'm going to talk about why stakeholders are tough. Maybe you'll be able to identify a little bit with that. I'm going to talk about the SCARF model for understanding why stakeholders are responding the way that they are to you. And we're going to talk about those methods for helping to get around that. So, some things like helping to increase their status, putting together a vision meeting, and why those techniques work, at least they have for me. And hopefully, they'll be successful for you. And of course, questions are welcome throughout. So, just a little bit about me. I am the CEO and creative director of a user experience agency in Austin, Texas. And today I'm in San Antonio for a meeting. Welcome or thank you for here from Texas. I have a master's degree in UX design. I have been a contributor to the book 97 Things Every UX Practitioner Needs to Know. And I do all kinds of teaching around UX. So I've been doing this for many, many years. And my company, Standard Beagle, we're a UX design agency. We do strategy, we do research, and we do product design. So just a little bit about us. We've been doing many projects lately on the enterprise and mid-level company level. So a lot of my experience comes from that level of stakeholder. So, first of all, the tough stakeholder. Maybe this will bring some memories to your mind, or maybe some fear of anticipating that. When we're in the middle of a project and we're dealing with a tough stakeholder, we are often like, why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Or we get angry and we think, God, why can't they just let me do my job? I just want to be able to do the best job I can. And we can see the danger coming. We foresee that there could be some sort of disaster on the horizon, which could make the project unsuccessful, or at least make it a miserable experience for us. And when it is a miserable experience, we kind of feel like this is happening to us. We're flipping around and landing in the mud. Whether or not the project is successful, this is still what we're going through in terms of anxiety and having to deal with someone who's not very open and amenable to the work that we're accomplishing for them, whether they be a VP at our own company or a client that we're working with. And that is what happened to me with a client I had last summer. And we're going to call him Fred, because obviously I don't want to reveal his real name. But Fred was a really tough stakeholder. And the thing is that I've dealt with lots and lots of tough stakeholders, but this one really caught me by surprise. I was in on a research project and I was working with another agency on this. And things started off feeling good. He was very excited about the work we were doing, but then things started to change and I could feel it happening and it didn't feel good. What happened was that all of a sudden he became much more disconnected. He started staying off camera for our check-in meetings. There were lots and lots of people on the calls, so he would just stay off and he would just stay very quiet. But on the backside, as we were preparing lists for reaching out to potential participants for user interviews, he started to micromanage the process. And I could feel from his tone that he was getting really frustrated with it. And he started to question the findings themselves. So I was bringing the findings to them and telling them this is what the data is showing, he was questioning severely, and it felt like he was trying to trip me up in those meetings and make me look bad in front of all the other people on the team. And at the very end of the project, there was no positive feedback from him. He almost seemed disappointed that we were able to successfully give the results that we were. That's a tough stakeholder, and that's tough to get around. And the thing is that I saw it coming, but I didn't see it coming. I missed those signs of trouble. And now that I'm reflecting back on it, there were some definite things that I've seen throughout my career that I should have I should have known, I should have said something and acted. Because I've had a number of observations about stakeholders, especially the ones that are going to be trouble. My first observation is that these are the ones that are critical. These are the ones that are very negative about what's happening with the project. They are, trying to bring everybody down, or they're pointing out the shortcomings. It doesn't feel good to be in meetings with them because of the criticism that you're receiving. And there's also seems to be a lack of buy-in. It could be initially with the start of the project, or it could be mid-project, which is even worse because you thought everything was going well, and then things start to go awry and the communication is poor. And you know that all of a sudden they've lost faith in what you're doing. And the problem is that they can influence others. And this is my third observation. They are actually telling other people that the work isn't going the way that it should, even though it might be. And it feels really unfair as the person who's completing the work to have to deal with someone who's spreading what could be untruths about it. So the question becomes, why? We could chalk it up to say this person's a jerk or this person just doesn't like me. But honestly, there's something deeper there. And that's what I want to go through here. I want to talk about how the human brain reacts. And this is where the SCARF model comes in. Every human has a basic set of needs. And this is beyond the hierarchy of needs that we all have learned about. These are the things that the brain is constantly judging us, our relationship with other people about: status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. These 5 things we're always doing with each other, with, no matter what the interaction is, it is always happening, and we're not always consciously aware of it. And with stakeholders in particular, I've found that the 3 that are bolded here, status, certainty, and relatedness, are the ones that most often come into play when you're dealing with a tough stakeholder. So let me explain what that means. Now, status. Our preference is to have a social kind of status or hierarchy where we're higher than others. I know that sounds really egotistical, but that's what fuels us. We are constantly dealing with a threat of status or a reward of status. Reward being if we feel higher than someone else, a threat being when we feel like we're going lower. And people will react very negatively when they feel their status is being threatened. Now, if you think about even just interactions that you've had in the past week, if you think about when someone has, burst out at you, or maybe, said some things that kind of made you feel less than, that usually is an underlying response of status. Somebody is, trying to make themselves be higher on the social pecking order, because social pain, like rejection or exclusion, these are things that are activating the pathways in our brain that are the same as physical pain. So status is really important. Now, another one is certainty. This is where humans want to feel like something is going to be certain ahead, or clarity. And time again, studies have shown that humans will make choices that are financially not going to be beneficial to them because they want to feel certain about something. So that feeling of uncertainty, this is really important. Now, this is shorn up by the book Thinking Fast and Slow, the study by Daniel Kahneman. You can read about his study about like people like choosing the poor choice with certainty over, the one that would give them more reward in the future. This is all a brain pattern. We want to feel certain, we want to feel safe. And then the third piece of the stakeholder puzzle is relatedness. As humans, our brains want to feel a connection or to other people. We want to feel like we're part of a group, we're part of some sort of cohesive team. And when we feel that way, there is reward that is generated in our brain, and we want to keep it coming. Now, when there's an absence of relatedness, this is generating a threat response. And so when we're thinking about how we relate to other people, if we feel excluded, we're going to react in a negative way. Now, all of these things that I just talked about came from this amazing book that I've read. It's called Your Brain at Work, and it's by Dr. David Rock. So if you want to read more about the SCARF model and these principles, I highly recommend it. This has totally changed the way that I think about my interactions with my family, but especially at work and dealing with stakeholders. So, if we think about things in terms of status and certainty and fairness, and we think about like how do we make sure that our stakeholders feel rewarded instead of threatened? What can we do? Well, here's a great quote that I've pulled from that book. Many great leaders understand intuitively that they need to work hard to create a sense of safety in others. And that's the piece. We want to generate a sense of safety. Sometimes that means that we're going to have to do things that go against what, where our own threat response is going to come into play. But that's what we have to do. So when we think about status and the stakeholder, we want to increase a person's sense of status by doing something to help them feel like they're being rewarded. So one way we can do this is by publicly recognizing them. What that does is that generates that positive reward, and the benefit is that it can resonate for years and years. Now, certainty also important, and we can help people have a better, sense of certainty by giving them a bit larger understanding of the big picture itself. So when we provide access to more information, this helps put our stakeholders' minds at ease. And then relatedness. We want people to be able to connect with us as stakeholders so that they can feel part of the team and that they belong. So when we are meeting with them, if we can allow more time for casual conversation or more opportunities to participate with the team, this really helps increase that sense of relatedness. So we can focus this though, instead of doing casual, like, hey, try this. There are actual methods that we can try and bring this into our processes as researchers and designers in order to bring more alignment from our stakeholders. So let's talk about managing status a little bit more, because this is probably the one that I run into the most. In fact, every time I hear about, oh, these people are kind of like quibbling with each other, usually it has to do with a sense of status. And if I think back on what happened with Fred last summer, his status felt threatened. He thought that I was threatening it somehow, and I don't remember how, but I made him feel less than. And he was reacting to that. Now, it could have been, how I presented the material. It could have been that I didn't defer to him enough on calls. It could have been, something that I wasn't even aware of, that, some other boss was in the room. I don't know, but definitely his status felt threatened. And this is where we need to be aware of hierarchy. Status is absolutely relative. How we feel about our status regarding other people is relative to the different situations that we're in. So I was coming in as an outsider, as a vendor to a company that had an already kind of political, not political, but like there were corporate politics going on. And these corporate politics include having a pecking order. And so the individuals that were at play there, there was already some sort of hierarchy in place. And then I was being inserted into it for a project. So that messed everything up. So being aware of that is really important. So what some of the things I could have done was I could have given a stroke. Now, a stroke is something like a compliment. It makes us feel good, like oh, thank you so much for, clarifying that point. Or, I really appreciate you providing that a perspective. It doesn't have to be, oh, you're the best person in the world. It just has to be enough to kind of defer. So that stroke really helps. And I could have done that. I could have also provided what I call a third party story. I could have given examples of how I've worked with other companies and kind of shown how I left that, corporate, politic hierarchy in place without threatening it, and given him some sense of ease about it. Another thing I could have done was I could have asked questions of Fred and kind of brought him to the point where he was coming up with an idea that I had kind of given him, but he felt like it was, he could have felt like it was his own. The thing here is that you want to be super careful. You're not trying to let them steal your idea per se. So there's a very careful line to walk here. But the idea is that we feel greater sense of status when we come up with our ideas on our own and somebody isn't just telling us to do something, because that feels threatening. And my favorite version part of like increasing status is to get uncomfortable intentionally. This is when we do something that kind of makes us look a little vulnerable. Maybe we're not all together all the time. Every time somebody sees that, they kind of feel a little bit better. So I heard a great story about this regarding a salesperson, and the way that he would kind of get uncomfortable, intentionally when he was talking with a potential client, was that he would, you know, go to find his pen and it was always missing. And he always had to borrow a pen. Oh my God, I forgot my pen. Can I borrow your pen? And the client or the potential client would think, oh my God, who's this person that doesn't have a pen? But it worked really well because it helped increase their status and it didn't make him look like he was an idiot or something like that. Just enough of being uncomfortable intentionally. Now, in terms of managing certainty and relatedness, there's all sorts of things that you can do, but there's one method that I love using, and it actually even helps with the status response. And this is a method I use with a big meeting, a vision meeting. So with Fred, he lacked the certainty and the relatedness. I'm sure that he thought that his idea, his vision of how the project would go would be one way, but when the data took us a completely different way and it started going in a different direction, I'm pretty sure that he stopped feeling that certainty and he stopped feeling like he was being part of the team. I was a stranger. He just didn't know me. So there was an absence of this relatedness. Now, if I could go back in time, get in my time machine and see what I could do, what I would have tried to do is create a vision meeting with him, not just a kickoff call, but an actual brainstorm and same page meeting. The nice thing about one of these types of meetings, and I'll explain the structure in just a second, is that it provides big picture. So this helps with certainty. It fosters, team relatedness, and there's idea creation from everyone. And that brings in the status piece. And then some other benefits to it is that when you have a vision meeting and you're creating it like with a whiteboard scenario, you're equalizing the voices. You don't have one person that is speaking and then everybody else falls in place. It reverses the influence. So it allows everybody to have influence and it doesn't, make it topsy-turvy in terms of one voice, doing it for everyone else. And then you really earn that buy-in. People feel like they're contributing and they're getting in there and they're feeling like they're involved. So they're really bought into the process. So in terms of creating it, the key ideas here are making sure that the folks that are involved in this meeting are all the key players. You don't want to have everybody like from the company, so 100 people would be way too many, but the key people, the key stakeholders, the key team members that need to be there. And what you're going to do is create structured exercises for them to move through. Now, you also need to make sure that there's strong facilitation so that someone is there guiding the process throughout and that they're enforcing this idea of being silent together. So you're working and creating ideas silently and then coming together as the group. And so this is an example of a vision meeting that I did a few years ago, pre-COVID, with a health district, and we were coming up with a vision for a new web property for this company. They're going in a different direction. There were lots of different voices from different departments that are at play, and I really wanted to make sure that we were going to all be on the same page for how I was going to move forward. And as a result of going through this process and this meeting with them, they were very bought in. Even the toughest stakeholder, the head of marketing, was all bought into it. And I didn't get any backlash at all through the rest of the project. So it resonated throughout. So here's the method for doing one of these vision meetings. First of all, at the beginning of the project, make sure that everybody knows that they're going to be part of this. Get everybody, just make sure it's part of the agenda. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to start the meeting by building rapport. You don't want to just launch into the exercises. You want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable. So that icebreaker is going to be really important. And they also need to feel like like the direction of the meeting. So having an agenda is important. And then you're going to do a whiteboard exercise. So this will be the piece where the facilitator comes in more strongly and is making sure that they're all working together and capturing those ideas. And the nice thing about doing it this way is that it's dead simple. I mean, honestly, it's an affinity diagram, and you're able to bring together everybody else and make that work visible. It also promotes that critical thinking. So just kind of go through this as an example of what one might look like. One idea here, though, is that selecting that facilitator is key. You absolutely need to do it. And that person needs to be a listener, they need to have presence, and they need to be objective. So make sure you choose them. And if it's not going to be you, it needs to be someone that you feel would have these capabilities. You need to make sure that you're giving yourself enough time. Just like I'm looking at the clock now, make sure that I give myself enough time for questions. You also want to make sure that you're not inviting like too many people. I would say that a good size is somewhere between 7 and 12 people. Any more, and it just becomes way harder to manage. A nice quiet conference room, like one I'm in right now, or you could do it in an office if you're doing it remotely, and make sure that you have an agenda in place. Whether you do it in person or remote is up to you. You can do it successfully both ways. If you're in person, you want to make sure that you have all the materials, the whiteboard, sticky notes, Sharpies. I use dot stickers. And I also have some method for timing. And if you're remote, make sure that you adjust the agenda in order to give more breaks because nobody wants to sit in a chair for 4 hours. And then you also want to make sure you have the right tool. So you could use Mural, you can use Miro, FigJam, whatever your choice of sticky note programs is. And when you do this, you want to make sure that you set those rules, build the rapport. When you're going through it, make sure that you ask everybody to put their phones to the side. Make sure that they have you have their full attention. And when you're building that rapport, your whole goal is to make people feel safe. So starting with an icebreaker is really helpful. Now, when you run the exercises, you're going to run it like you would run a whiteboard, like affinity diagram session. You're going to start with a question, and you're going to get everybody to write one idea per sticky note, and then you're going to have them put it up on the board. You'll collect the ideas. You'll have them, spend a few minutes on each question, put the ideas up on the board, and then organize them so you can start to see patterns. Where are people coming together? And then ask them to label it for you. And then finally, what you're going to do is you're going to decide which one is the most important one to move forward with. So once you've done that, you can repeat for each question. So here's a few examples of ones that I've done with teammates. A lot of them have been online. And these are definitely going to help you build alignment. I do want to make sure that I have enough time for questions. So feel free to pop them in. And while you're doing that, I'm going to just kind of run through the benefits here. So all the voices are heard. It's modeling positive behavior for everyone. And what you're doing is you're getting a commitment over agreement. And this is really helpful for those stakeholders that could be troublesome down the road. They're when they're asked to contribute, this helps increase their status. They feel much better about it. They can see the big picture from here, which increases their certainty. And it's part of team building, so they feel related to the process. So it helps. All these things can help you understand how you can relate better and build more alignment with your stakeholders. Um, we covered everything on my agenda today. We talked about the SCARF model. We talked about methods for aligning with stakeholders, and I would love to take your questions if you have any.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Cindy. I really enjoyed that because I've felt that a few times, the challenges with tough stakeholders. So it's a great way of kind of breaking it down and thinking about it in different kind of ways instead of going the traditional human route of just not thinking they were a nice person.
Right? That's what we do. If you break it down, you're like, oh, yeah.
Excellent. So,
Awesome.
so yeah, please do enter your questions in whichever platform you're in. I'll keep an eye on them. But I did have one question, and something jumped to my mind, and particularly when you were talking about status. I had a difficult client or a stakeholder, and the challenge was they had designed the process, and we were coming in and changing it. And I tried all of that of inclusion and stuff, but they fundamentally disagreed with what we were doing. And they were like, no, the way I've done it is right. And yeah, I couldn't convince them otherwise. Even when I showed data of us getting progress and how it was working, because I guess it was attacking their status. So what would you do there where, yeah.
That is the hardest one. This is this is where I think the technique of guiding someone so they come up with the suggestion is probably one. It's the hardest thing to do, but it's probably going to be the most successful because from their point of view, they're perfect. Everything is there is fine, and no matter what you say, you're not going to convince them otherwise. Only when they've come up with the idea that, oh yeah, we could really improve there, that's when things will start to change. So some thoughtful questions that could maybe, get someone going in that direction without actually leading them, because they'll be able to spot a leading question, from a mile away. But if, even with the data, if there's just, I think it's building rapport and I think it's just helping them come to the realization on their own that something has to change. That's when it's going to be okay. And that's the hard thing to do.
Yeah, I unfortunately didn't succeed in convincing them. We just had to go ahead with them constantly niggling at our heels and trying to stop us.
Yeah, no, I wish I had an answer, but it's good to recognize what was going on with that relationship. And, sometimes you're not going to win, but I would say that, maybe the next time you'll be able to align with the stakeholder a little bit better.
Great. Well, thank you very much. So yeah, do send in some questions. We don't have any more time now, but if you do pass through any questions or think of anything, we'll post them on the Slack group and ask Cindy to answer there. So thank you very much, Cindy.